Yeah, so my name is Owen Deery, and I've been making games independently for about 7 years now, under the name Fireface. My most recent project was a game called Small Radios, Big Televisions.
How easy was it to get so going towards releasing a title like that that's doing so well? I mean, I played it this morning. It's actually amazing. Like your shaders and stuff. I'll get to that, but I have a lot of questions about your shaders for sure. But I mean, so getting to that point of making a game of that level and working with companies like Adult Swim Games and everything, what what happened to get to that level? You know what I mean?
So up to that point, I'd basically been just doing smaller Flash games and online games. So I started out doing Flash games and just selling those one by one to portals. And then Flash died, and so I started making HTML5 games. And so I had sold a bunch of those. I sold a bundle to this Brazilian company, and so I got this big lump sum of cash. And I was like, sweet, summer's coming up, so I'm just going to take all this money and I'm going to spend the summer just working on something cool. Because basically up till that point, these web games had been refined to the extent that I was just making them for as broad an audience as possible. Yeah. So it's super accessible graphics and super easy to play. And I was like, I want to make a cool game, a game that I would want to play. Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to spend the summer, I'm going to make a WebGL demo using all this HTML5 code I have. And that way it'll just be playable in a browser and I can send it to everybody, because I just wanted to make something and then send it to as many people as I could. And so I spent the summer doing that, and then I sent it to as many people as I could, and I got a really good response. And so I said, okay, cool, I'll just start making this full time. And that's basically how it happened, yeah. And I was like, I'll try to keep making this game and we'll see what happens.
How long have you been in the industry for? You know what I mean? I guess you went to school, right? I'll ask about that afterwards as well. But from school to, I guess now, how long has it been?
So it's been 7.5 years, I think. Yeah, I started working at a studio right after I graduated in 2011. And that studio immediately shut down. It's yeah, I was like, sweet, I got this job at a studio and there's all these cool mentors around and I was learning a bunch of stuff, and then immediately everybody got fired. And so I didn't really want to go through that again, and I was like, I just want to make some games. And so I had super low cost, I was just living by myself, and I had a bunch of money saved up, and so I was like, fuck it, I'll just start making games. Yeah. And then that just kept happening until now. I'm still just doing that. Yeah, it just hasn't stopped.
Well, I mean, in terms of going to college, what did you take in college?
I was in the game development program at Algonquin in Ottawa, yeah.
So since your release of Small Radios, Big Televisions, how has that played into your life now? I mean, that's a pretty good game, and I'm sure it's doing amazing, right? So how has that played into your life to this point so far?
I mean, things are basically the same. There's, what's good is to have, passive income coming in as a game studio, because when you're working as a game studio, you basically have to keep creating if you want to keep money rolling in. But if you start making retail titles, it's great because they're out on the market and people keep buying them in perpetuity. And so you sort of have this slow trickle of income that comes in over time and hopefully goes on for a while if you have a nice long tail. Yeah, exactly. So that's nice in that it gives you a bit of security. Whereas before, it's if I wasn't currently making a game, I would be making no money at all. Yeah, and so there's a real sense of urgency to constantly be making games and just shoving them out the door and then trying to just sell them to people. So that's it. It's a bit more calm, I guess, now as a game developer, and not as manic. Yeah.
So I guess now that you have that, passive income, you don't have to worry so much as to you can spend a little more time working on your next title, right? Spend a little more time on that. I guess pertaining to Small Radios, Big Televisions, I mean, you write your own shaders. Sometimes I look at your game, I was playing it today, and I was like, how did you how did your brain go from I want to visualize this and I'm gonna do it, and then you did it, and so what was that process?
Yeah, I don't know, just a lot of experimentation, I guess. I was always super into graphics programming when I was in school, but when you're making Flash games and little games, there's not really any room for that. Yeah. And so I guess I just had a lot of built up ideas or creativity in terms of graphics ideas I wanted to try out. And also when you're making a game that sort of exists in a real world and kind of a dreamish VR virtual world, there's a lot of room to play with sort of different ways of representing things. Things don't necessarily need to look exactly as they would in the real world. You can kind of stylize things really heavily. But I was still able to be creative in a more realistic way with the real world sections of the game. So that it was it was fun to work on the graphics in the game, and that I got to sort of work on both sides creatively, sort of more realistic shaders as well as more stylized stuff. So
I mean, in terms of Fireface, like, did you contract anybody out for your project, or were you the only one, just like you're the sole person working on this project, and there was like nobody else involved?
in terms of developing the actual game, yeah, it was basically entirely me. My wife came on briefly at the end because I was crunched as hell, and she's a wonderful artist and graphic designer, and I was just like, I need extra art to put in this game because I don't have the energy or the time or the resources to make any of these pieces. So she was very helpful to do that, but otherwise in terms of programming and art and music, that was all me, yeah.
So I mean, so did you build the engine for Fireface by yourself?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, to my knowledge, I don't think Algonquin teaches you how to build engines. Like, how did you kind of go through the process of learning how to kind of write your own engines, and on top of that, add shaders and then add VR? Like, I've been watching a lot of like your blog. Is a very interesting blog, by the way. You should go read it. For that, you have a list of all stuff you've done, and I'm like, you've built your own engines, you made your own shaders, you integrated VR to them. Like, you're really on top of it. Like, how did you go from kind of like that base school knowledge that doesn't really, to my knowledge, teach you that, to go into that level of game design?
Well, it sort of started when I was in school because when you start off in school, they start teaching you how to program, but it's very basic and you're just doing command line stuff. And I found it really interesting. It was my first experience programming. Like, this is super cool, but the stuff I'm creating is really boring. And I want to make games, that's why I joined this program. And so I basically started researching like other technologies I could use, like this technology XNA was big at the time, and that allowed you to make games on Xbox, and I was like, shit, this is awesome. And I knew like just enough C++ that I could figure out the C# to make games with XNA, and so I just like immediately started making games, and like I said, I haven't stopped making games. And so just like, I guess just the trial by fire of having to make a game, and then by the end of it you see all the terrible decisions you've made, and so then once you start making another game, all that stuff, you can use it to build something better. And it's just sort of escalated over time. Like, even when I look at the small radios code now, it's like a mess. Like, I don't like to look at it, and just because like I look at it, I'm like, what was I thinking? I knew no idea what I was doing, and I'm sure in like 2 years I'll look back on the stuff I'm doing now and I'll be like, it's a mess. So I guess just doing it nonstop is how I figured it out.
Yeah, I remember looking at, I think you were even saying how you kind of coded small radios for itself. Like, the game was coded for that, and it wasn't modular at all. Like, you couldn't take it from that to a different product, which kind of makes sense in terms of building an engine. But I guess as you learn to become like that.
I sort of, as I was designing it, I thought I was making it like super modular and easy to use.
In your head,
yeah, I was like, yeah, you could make like other stuff with this. But by the end of the project, like, I was super stressed out, and I was just like working nonstop. Because also, when it's a project of that size for the first time, you're a really shitty project manager. So even though I had a publisher like looking out for me, a lot of the time I just gave myself way too much work and was super stressed out. And so by the end I'd thrown like anything dynamic in the trash, and I was like hard coding everything. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Your soundtrack, that's something that I definitely want to talk about too. Like, you're something like you made the music for the game, yeah? Yeah. So I mean, just something I listened to the distortions and I'm like, what did you? I saw kind of like what you use, like on Twitter. You have some posts of like kind of like the actual engine you use and stuff like that. I'm like, so what did you use, and like kind of, again, the inspiration behind a lot of the sounds you made?
So I built almost all the music in the game using a software called Reason, and Reason is great because it's unlike a lot of other music software I've used in that it presents you like a rack of equipment and like synthesizers and mixers and stuff, and so I built all the music in there because it's mostly electronic, a lot of synthesizers and a lot of like tube amplifier kind of sounds and a lot of distortions. So that's sort of where the sound evolved from. And the cool thing about it as well is that since Reason is purely digital software with just a bunch of parameters that you're messing around with, I was able to basically create a clean version of the song that I would use for one part of the game, and then when I needed the distorted version, I could basically take the same song and like slow it down and like change the parameters, increase the distortion, and put like glitches in. And so that was really, I guess, useful in terms of not having to write like 50 separate tracks. I would just have to write like 25 and then do like basically remixes of the other 25, In
my head, I was listening to the sound, I'm like, did he just like do each thing separately, or did he just like, I don't know, I was trying to think of how you use it, and using Reason makes total sense. Like, I've seen Reason beforehand, and my friend used Reason until I make music a long time ago, and I never really got into it myself. So hearing you using that makes total sense. Yeah, it makes total sense. Yeah. Like, your GIFs on Twitter, sometimes I look at that and I'm like, that's really cool. Like, you know what I mean? So I guess my question behind that is, what did you, so like kind of how did you come up with the idea of using GIFs for not only just promotions, but just GIFs for, I guess, keeping track of your own work? Because I remember you saying on your website you used GIFs to kind of see the progress of your own work. Like, how did you get into that habit very early on?
One of the first things I learned when I started making games in school and like posting about them online was that no one gives a shit about your code. Like, no matter how awesome you think your code is or how like neat this system you wrote is, if there's not something neat to look at, everyone's going to ignore it. So I used to do these devlogs on TigSource for all the games I used to work on, and you very quickly learn that if your post doesn't have a ton of nice pictures and GIFs, it just drops immediately and everyone ignores it. And so I've tried to sort of infuse that into everything that I put online. Like, it's got to look super cool. Like, if it looks interesting to me, then it's interesting enough to put online. And so, yeah, basically when I started work on small radios, I was just like, I'm gonna just start posting GIFs because there's cool stuff I'm working on. Whereas like with the web games, it was like there's nothing interesting about them, about the development. There might have been cool games at the end, but the development process wasn't that interesting. But with small radios, I was super into sort of the discovery and the creativity behind the graphics code that I was writing. Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, this is cool. I should like stick this on Twitter. Maybe someone will like it. And basically that's what led the game to like becoming a game, right?
So what games inspired you kind of like growing up? Like how did you kind of go like, oh, I kind of want to be a game developer and I kind of make games like this? Like, was there anything like that when you're growing up? Or?
Yeah. So when I was growing up, it was mostly like shooters. It was just 100% shooters. My parents didn't want us to have game consoles in the house. So I was like almost entirely a PC gamer. Like, everyone starts talking about Zelda, and I have no knowledge, like no reference. Like, yeah, I played like Mario and Tetris, but like, yeah, I don't know any of that stuff. So I was all like PC shooters, like Half-Life and Deus Ex and Doom and all that stuff. And then that's actually how I started kind of getting into games. Was when I was in high school, I started messing around with the level editor in Unreal Engine, or for Unreal Tournament, and started messing around making levels with that. And so I was like, cool, yeah, I could maybe do this for a job. And then I applied to Algonquin. And yeah. And well, I joined Algonquin being like, yeah, maybe I'll be like a level designer or an animator or something. And then I got in there and I'm like, no, code, programmer. Yeah.
So what games have you been playing recently? Like, you know, like what kind of games have you spent a little bit of time? I know being a game developer, you don't have as much time to play games as much, but when you do have that free time, like what do you play now?
I'm playing like exclusively the new Doom 2016. Yeah, I don't have a lot of time to play games, but over the Christmas holidays this past month, I was like, okay, I'm going to buy some games and I'm going to play them. And I started playing Doom and I still haven't stopped. It's so good. No, I haven't. No, it's still on PC. Yeah, I heard they got like motion controls. That's super cool. Yeah, I'd love to try it out. But yeah, I've been playing that nonstop. Not only is it like a super tight game, it's like so well designed, but it's also really nice to look at. Like, it's beautifully rendered. And I like, there's a couple of techniques I saw in that game, and I'm like, I want to do that. So there's a couple of things on my Twitter where like I saw this in Doom and I had to put it into my engine because it's too cool. Like, they have this really awesome glass effect that I had never seen anywhere else, where they have like sort of like dirty, foggy, blurry glass. And yeah. And I was like, that's so cool. And I looked it up, and some guy had actually done like a tech write-up, and it's like, this is how they did their glass. I'm like, I can do that. And so I put it in my engine, and it's so fun to just see an effect and be able to recreate it in your own code. It's really fun.
Yeah, that's my favorite part of making games. It's easily that. It's like seeing something and going like, I know how you did that, and I'm glad you showed me how to do it. Now I'm gonna do it. Like
Let me do that. Let me try and do something with that. Try and put a twist on it.
Okay, so what's your least favorite part about making video games? Like easily, like just hands down, like I just can't stand this.
Business. Business. Fuck business, man. It's like a necessary evil if you want to be independent. But yeah, it's like doing payroll and doing taxes and making sure your corporate records are up to date and all that bullshit. Yeah, that's the worst part. It's like, I just love to make games. So as often as I can, I try and partner with people who can handle that sort of stuff for me.
Yeah, we just do it for you.
Yeah, exactly. So you can have some of my game if you do all of the business.
So I'm gonna ask you two last questions, I guess. So the last question beforehand is, okay, if someone gave you $1 trillion specifically to remake a game that you wish you could redo and add or remove things to it, what game would you make and what would you add or remove from it?
Ridiculously hard question. Honestly, maybe I'd remake the original Deus Ex, because that's my favorite game growing up. I really love that game. And the new Deus Ex, it's a great game, but it's not my Deus Ex. It's not the same thing. So I would spend the money recreating Deus Ex in like a mid-90s shooter style. Like, it wouldn't have updated graphics or anything. It would just be the same game but more, you know? Because I just love everything about that game. I just want more of it.
And last question we have is, if you had to give somebody, I guess, like some kind of, you know, help or some kind of suggestion, what would you tell people to kind of do while making the games, or, you know, even while doing indie games? Like, kind of what's the suggestion you have for them?
Just keep doing it. Do it as much as you can, and put your stuff out there. Just like, if you make something and you think it's neat, put it online. Even if you think it kind of sucks, it probably does. But everyone has made shitty stuff. Like the stuff that I started posting on the internet when I started making games, it wasn't very good. But, you know, if you just keep doing it and you keep putting stuff online, eventually it'll get really cool.
I do have one last question. How many side projects do you have? Because to my knowledge, a lot of indie game developers have like 30 just projects sitting in a folder. Someone's like, I'm never touching this ever again. It's never going to happen again.
I have a lot of unfinished projects, but I think I'm pretty focused in terms of the stuff I'm working on. Because I get to work on like the tech as well as the game design at the same time. If I'm ever feeling like tired of working on a specific game or game design, I'll just do like shaders for a little bit. Like, I'll just be like, oh, let's like do a new glass thing, or like do a new type of normal map or something like that. And that usually gets like the side project energy out of me, and I can go back to the game, and then I can use the new tech in the game. So yeah.
Makes sense. Well, anyway, Owen, it was very nice. It was very nice having this conversation with you. Thanks for coming to this interview, for being the first breadwinner, dude. Anyways, nice meeting you, man.